first event tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Guildhall. The Guildhall is, Baba, you won't believe this, but it was built in 1544, which isn't very old for us in Much Wenlock, but that'll sound really old to you. Okay. But, you know, Wenlock goes back to the Saxon times when Milburger turned up, which is about 600, 550, around then, something along those lines. So 1540 is not very old. And we have a portrait of one of the local councillors. And so that's the first event. And then we have a whole festival. And in a week's time, about now, it's 6 o'clock on exactly 7 days' time. I'll be sat in the George and Dragon pub having a pint of beer. I can almost guarantee that, God willing. Okay, whatever happens, God willing, that's where I'm going to be. So John Rowe sends his apologies. He is doing something very glamorous, like flying to Marrakesh or doing a story round in Singapore or something along those lines. And
I think he's headed to Marrakesh.
Yeah, I think he's heading to Marrakesh. So he did. I was talking to him earlier, and we'll talk about the hybrid thing in a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to get cracking. So Keith, if you were to go, so Keith from Lincolnshire, and behind him, that's the Lincolnshire Wold. And if you look over that brim, but I see the seaside, is it looking east?
Yes, it could be. Yeah, it's a long way away from where I took that photograph. Yeah.
Yeah. And Keith and I had something very much in common up to about a week ago, and we both had a vintage tractors, but I've actually sold mine because somebody's asked me if I'd sell it to them because they want to refurb it up and everything else, and so I've let them have it. So I am tractorless as I sit in front of you today, and we'll see how long that lasts for. Anyway, so Keith, over to you, my friend.
Yeah, so Mike, I'm just looking forward to seeing how your boat project develops, because you bought a boat, I gather. So
Yes, I do have a boat, and we have a really nice river called the River Severn and the River Avon, and I know every pub along the banks of both of them. I wonder how that happened.
Right. Okay, right. Well, I tried this story out a few days ago at Rona's Chaotic Ceilidh. And and it's a special day yesterday, which will become evident as we go along. Well, it was over 1,200 years ago in Italy, and a lot of the young men were going off to war, dressed in their armor and their tunics. The troubadours, if I get that right, was singing songs of love and also of war. And there's a young man there in one of the villages in Italy, and his father traded in beautiful cloth, and he had a shop, and he was a merchant to trade in this, and he sold these beautiful cloths of different colours and different designs. But this young man, he didn't really want to follow his father's footsteps in being part of this trade of dealing in cloths. He just dreamt of being a knight, going off to war and coming back a great prince. But he was there in the shop, but then, much to his surprise one day, his father said that he could go to war, and provided him with a beautiful tunic and some beautiful armor and sword and shield and helmet. And he was delighted. He was just, it's off to war. And as he set off on his great horse, he met a very poor knight whose armor was all rusty, and his tunic was all ragged. And this young man felt sorry for him and said, get off your horse and we will exchange armor. And so that's what he did. And so this young man, he took off his armor, his tunic, and he gave it to this poor knight. And this poor knight was astounded that this young man should give him his beautiful and well prepared armor. Well, this young man, he went back to his father and he started to work in in the shop selling all this beautiful cloth. And he was dealing with a customer one day, and there was a beggar that came in. But this young man was too busy serving the customer. But when he'd finished that task, the beggar had gone, and so he chased after him down the lane, and he caught up with the beggar. And this young man, he emptied his pockets of silver and gold and gave to the beggar. And the beggar was amazed. Ah! And the young man, he went back to the to the shop, and his father was very angry. Said, "Well, you know, somebody could have come in and stole some of the produce, some of our cloth when you were away. You should have been looking after the shop." He wasn't very happy with his son. Well, as time went on, the young man, he learned that the local church was falling down. And so he took a bale of this very fine cloth of his father's, and he sold it. And with the money, he gave it to the priest so he could rebuild the church. And when his father learned of this, he was very, very angry and brought him to the marketplace and accused him of stealing from his shop. But this young man, he tore off what clothes he had, and he stood there naked in the marketplace and said, "You are no longer my father. I will follow and obey my heavenly Father." And so this young man, he just was very poor. He did have a very brown, poor tunic, and he walked through the streets and then through the valleys. And his friends were the sun and the moon, and all the birds and all the animals that were around. And this young man, as he walked, the other young men that started to follow him. And they were amazed at the way this young man was able to just find his way through, following the ways of the Heavenly Father and being friends of all of nature. Now, this young man, one day he met a young lady, a young girl who was a nun, and she was very religious, and her name was Clara. And they talked together, and they went, and they wanted a meal, and so they went to a local inn and asked for a meal. But the landlord, he smiled and looked at them and said, "Oh, these religious people, they don't eat meat on a Friday." And so he served them up a roast chicken. But this young man, whose name was Francis, prayed over the chicken, and it became a dish. And so Clara and Francis were able to eat this fish. And the whole of the following of Francis, there was brothers that joined them, and they weren't cozy, wrapped up in monasteries, but they were just poor that walked the land. But one day there was one of the brothers that said, "Well, which way shall I go? Which way shall I go?" And Francis said, "Well, spin around, turn around, whiz, whiz, whiz round." And he did, he spun round. And then Francis said, "Well, the way you're pointing is the way that you should travel." And off that young brother went. Now, there was not much water, and these poor brothers hadn't much they could get a wash, and so they smelled quite a lot. But Francis and his brothers, they went to the Pope and asked for a blessing. But the Pope said, "Oh, you smell, go away. You ought to go and roll in a pigsty." And so Francis, he went to the farm and he found a pigsty, and he said, "Brother Pig, may I share your bedding and your sty?" And he rolled in the mud along with a pig. And Francis, he went back to the Pope, and much to my surprise, this time the Pope, he blessed him. And Francis and his brothers, they roamed the land, preaching the gospel of good news. They could be saved from sin and death. And once there were some birds that were arguing. And Francis said, stop arguing. Stop arguing among yourselves. God has provided you with wings, has provided you with song. Now just be friends with one another and just share out any wheat that you find. And one of the brothers, one day, he went to the beach and he spoke to all the fish that were lined up just at the edge of the sea. Behind them there was great sea monsters. And all of them, they heard this brother preaching about the good news of Jesus. And there was one day at Gabio, it's a little village, there was a wolf that were kept eating all the lambs, harassing the people. But Francis, he went and he found the wolf. And he took the wolf to the people of Gabio and he held his paw and said, my friend the wolf is sorry for eating your lambs. And from that time on, the people, they forgave this wolf and they fed him and looked after him. Now, they didn't receive much gifts from the after they were given any money or anything, they would give it to the poor. But one day there was a rich nobleman that said to Francis, I will give you this mountain. And Francis, he received the gift and he went up on the mountain and he was able to pray there day and night. It was shared by his brothers and his followers. And one day there was a six-winged seraphim appeared and spoke to Francis. And then there was a pain in Francis's hands and his feet. And there were mark of nails in his hands and his feet, the stigmata. And Francis was getting very, very poorly, and so his brothers took him back to Assisi. And there in Assisi, he remembered about a rich lady that lived in Rome that baked almond cakes. And so the brothers, they sent for this rich lady from Rome to bring some almond cakes, but they hadn't gone very far when she was on her way with the almond cakes and with a beautiful shroud. And she came and she gave the almond cakes to Francis and he enjoyed the almond cakes, but he refused the shroud. He said that a poor man as much as me are not worthy of such a beautiful shroud. Lay me in the ground, the brown ground, deep there in the summer, just laid in my poor clothes. And so that's what they did. And as Francis, he passed away, he died, they laid him in the ground. And all around was all the followers of Francis dressed in their brown cloaks. And all around them there was the rats and mice and rabbits and foxes, and flying overhead was all the birds and swallows, saying goodbye to their special friend, St. Francis of Assisi.
Well, thank you, Keith. That's a lovely story. I enjoyed that. I remember the film Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. And when Francis of Assisi had to meet the Pope was 10 steps up on a great big throne. And the Pope in the film said, wait there. And every time he came down a step, he took off a layer of clothing. And when he got to the bottom, he said, in front of you is a Christian and a good religious man. And he turned around, and every time he went back up the steps, they put on another layer of responsibility on him as he got to the bottom, and he sat at the Pope. And whoever thought that up, I thought it was just lovely. So all these years later, I remember that in that film. And I remember when Brother Sun, Sister Moon came out, and it had a real impact on everybody. People were talking about it in supermarkets and all sorts of things, you know. To this day, that man had some power over us all.
Yeah, it was the feast of St. Francis yesterday.
Yeah, no, yeah, I heard that. Yes, I did. Yes. So, Evita, I'm not sure where you are geographically. But you're certainly not.
I am. I can now. I've moved. I don't know if you can see. I've turned my camera around. If you can see how sheer the mountains, they just go up. Okay.
So where,
right.
Go on.
So I'm right. Sorry. I'm right in the center of Switzerland. Now, how do I turn my camera back around? Give me a second. Fortunately, oh yeah. Here I am.
That mountain view.
Right.
So
I'm
right.
Sunset. So it's sunset in 5 minutes time here. So
no, we're an hour later in the center of Switzerland, William Tell's country. I'm not telling William Tell's story. I'm also not going to tell one of my original stories. I've decided it's just some of us, and I can't be too noisy with my singing. But I thought I might actually go way back. As you saw, those mountains here are incredible. They just go from, you're down in the town in this part of Switzerland, and the mountains are just basically cliffs. So you go from 600 meters right up to 2,000. There's so many waterfalls. There are still glaciers. There is a road that is called the Klausenpass that goes right through. It goes up, 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 up. It's a very windy, very, 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 very dizzying road. Like on the one side, we've got a thing called the Postauto, which are the yellow buses that you can take to the other side, to Glarus, that is more north of here. Tourists get stuck because they come in their big camper vans, and then they come down this dizzying road, and the Postauto is approaching. So the rule usually is that the one coming down should back up the car to make some space, because the roads get really narrow. And what often happens is that the people from the flatlands, the lowlands, like from the Netherlands or Germany, they do not know how to drive these mountain passes. So they get scared, because when you look down, you could fall down 1,000 meters, and the railings aren't very strong. So the bus driver will stop, get out of the bus, tell the Dutch guy, get out from behind the wheel, sit himself into these big Winnebago camper vans, back it up to sometimes 2-3 kilometers until there's a little bay, and then walk back down and take the bus past. Anyway, let's go way back. And I'll tell you a very old Swiss folk tale, which is not just a folk tale, because it's the truth, as you know. Now, that story is older. It's much, much older than your great-grandfather. You were not even a twinkle in your dad's eye when this happened. Now, I don't know how it happened, Keith and Mike and Roisin, in your parts of the world, how boundaries, that silly concept, how they were determined. You can tell me after the story. Now, here in Uri, which is right in the middle of Switzerland, boundaries were often determined. It was on top of the mountain. Now, the meadows here are so very rich, and as you know, in summer, the farmers will take their cows to the higher grass, the sweet meadows, to eat that sweet, sweet grass, and then make the cheese while they're up there. So, of course, everybody wanted a piece of the best meadows. The higher up you can go, the better the grass will be, and the hay that you're going to cut for the summer. So here between Uri and Glarus, there was constant squabbling and fighting over where does Uri actually start and where does Glarus start. And usually the Swiss, they put a stone, a bit like a cairn. Baba, see, a cairn is like a tower of rocks on top of each other that would determine this is this land and this is the other side. Now they just could not agree. There were fisticuffs, there was yelling, there was a lot going on. So one day they decided, well, they'd have to ask someone wiser of how they should actually solve this problem. Of course, everybody had an opinion, as it is with people. And then the priest said, why don't you both elect a runner that will get up very, very early in the morning when the rooster crows on both sides. You run and run and run your little hearts out. And where you meet, you two, this is where the boundary stone will be set. Everybody thought that was a terrific idea. Well, how shall we go about it? Which rooster should we choose? Now, on both sides in the villages, there was discussion, there was arguing. Everybody had an idea and a half of who should be the runner. Now, finally, they got the fittest young men. They're probably like 23, something like that. And because the mountains are so steep, these boys are fit, I'm telling you. They have to go and cut the grass with scythes and on shear, things like that. And to this day, people fall off and die. So finally, on both sides, they had chosen their runners. But alas, how are they going to get up that early? Now was the question of the choice of the rooster. Of course, in Glarus, they said, this is easy. Let's find the best rooster, not just in the village, but in the valley. Let's pamper him. Let's file his claws. Let's brush his beautiful tail and let's feed him the choicest morsel. No more just scratching in the dirt. We will spoil that rooster so he can wake up our runner. Now, on the Uri side, where I'm staying, they consulted the oldest lady in the village. And she said, oh, I'm telling you, you go and find yourself the scrawniest and hungriest little rooster, for he will wake up early in the morning and crow for his food. Keep him lean, keep him mean, she said. And that's what the people of Uri did. So the full moon had come. That's when it was decided the next morning in Glarus and in Uri. Who do you think, which rooster do you think crowed first? The hungry one. He crowed his little heart out. Where's my food? Where's my food? And the runner, Sepp, he was off. He ran up that mountain, and you should see that. It's 35, 40 kilometers up. There was no road, just up through the meadows, over rocks, jumping creeks. He ran and he ran. He came to the top of the mountain. He looked as far as he could see. His eyesight was good, but there was no sign of the other guy. Well, never mind, he said, and he began to run down the hill. Meanwhile, in Glarus, the spoilt, fat rooster just saw a bit of grey and tucked his beak back under his feathers and fluffed himself up a bit. He sounded like a chook rather than a rooster. And then finally, when the sun shone straight into his eyes and his girls, the chookies, started to peck him, get up, you old rooster. He went, where's my food? And that runner headed off, and he ran and he ran. His legs were pumping, he was sweating. But oh dear, he was only a few kilometers into his run when he saw Sepp from Uri coming towards him. He fell to the ground, weeping, I'm telling you, weeping like a small child. He says, oh no, Sepp, you can't do that to me. This is nearly on our side. I mean, that rooster is terrible. It just didn't wake up. Please, please have mercy. Let's walk back up the mountain and put a cornerstone where it's meant to be, on the top, you know. Sepp was a good man. But he said, I cannot do that. A deal is a deal. Oh, please, he said, the shame of it, the shame of it. I will never live it down. Sepp said, all right, mate, I'll make your deal. You carry me up the mountain as far as you can carry me, and when you can no longer carry me, that's where we'll determine the cornerstone to be. So Fritz took Sepp on his back and he started running, and he started walking, and he started struggling. But remember, those boys, they're restless as well. They're heavy, they're big. And up he went, and up he went. The sweat was pouring into his eyes and down his beard. His legs nearly buckled, but he wouldn't give up. Towards the end, he crawled. And then, I'm sorry to tell you, my friends, he fell down dead. And to this day, the cornerstone between Glarus and Uri in Switzerland is down from the top of the mountain, about 12 k's down, in a beautiful flat called Urnerboden, which means the Urner Flats. And it has stayed there to this very day. Oppali, oppali, ooh-wali, oh, ooh-wali, 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 oh. Oppali, oppali, ooh-wali, oh, ooh-wali, ooh-wali, oh. Oppali, oppali, ooh-wali, oh, ooh-wali, 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 oh. Oppali, oppali, ooh-wali, oh, ooh-wali, ooh-wali, oh. Believe me, it is true.
Kavita, that was lovely. And I've got a batting order here, and it would be Machine next. So if Machine, if you don't mind too much, I'm going to tell my story now, because I want to follow that with one. If that's okay with you, mate?
Yeah, fine, no problems.
Right, Evita, this is I hope you enjoy this. So this goes back to about the 1917, around then. And we're talking about the place that they're now called Russia. And I know we're not supposed to tell Russian stories nowadays because what's happening in the Ukraine and everything else, but this isn't part of the Western Russia. This takes you right back to the steppes. And this is where the Cossacks used to live. Well, they used to live, they still live there to this day. Those are the horsey people on the plains over there, and they live in yurts and girts and things like that. And when the changes came over onto the west of Russia, a message came through to this tiny little village right up on the steppes there, where they had decided on the edge of the mountains that it would be a place where they wouldn't move every 3 weeks, that they would settle. So settle they did, and they had done for a couple of 100 years. And the message came through, and it said this: you have to decide who owns what piece of land where for yourselves nowadays, because there's no lord. You would just have to do it yourself. So what they did was that they came back and they had a big meeting, and they decided this, that they would draw lots. And as they drew lots, you would touch the big Christian cross in the middle of the village, and you would walk around a bit of land that you wanted. And as long as you came back before the sun went down, and you weren't allowed to go up before the sun came up. So at the dawn, you touched the cross, and you could walk around and you could come back, and that would be your piece of land. And that's what they did. And the first one, the whole village was standing, and he touched the cross. And he was a good, honest man from a good, honest family. And he walked, you only need a bit of water. So he walked across a little stream, and he went round some woods. And he went round a bit of the good land, close to the village. And he went round a bit further to some of the land that he would need for his fodder, for his cows over the winter. And he came back down. And by about 11 o'clock in the morning, he touched the cross and said, I've left a few markers out there. That's going to be my land. And they all clapped and they all cheered. And the next morning, somebody else came up, and it was his turn. And they were another person. And he touched the cross, and he went off the other way, completely in the other direction. But I like the other one. He went over the stream, because you always need a bit of water if you're farming. Then he came round some of the good meadowland, some of the best land. And under there's a little orchard. But he didn't take all the orchard. He took about half of it. And he too went up, and he found some land that he could do to make the fodder for the winter for his animals. And he came back, and by 12 o'clock, he touched the cross and said, I'll take those lands. And everybody marked it on a big map. And the third one, he did much the same. And the fourth one, he did much the same. But there's always one, Avita. There is always one that always wants more, and wants to be bigger, and wants to be greater, and wants to be more famous, and wants to be richer, and wants to be better clothed, and better fed, and everything else. And some work very hard, and others, they just sit and expect it to happen. But this one, he said, he'd been looking and he worked it out, and he touched the cross just as the sun went up, and he ran straight out in a straight line for 20 miles. And he got there for about 11 o'clock, and he turned and he ran another straight out for another 15 miles. And he turned and he was coming back towards the village, and he was getting up to the 40 miles, and the sun was going down, and he was coming up to the high street, and the sun was going down, and he had to touch that cross before the sun went down, or as he got nothing at all. And just as he got there, the sun was going down, and he leaped forward and he put his hand on the cross. And everybody was there, and everybody agreed, Abita. Everybody who saw that happen agreed that he had touched the cross before the sun went down, and the land that he'd run round, all that land would be his. But he hadn't moved. He just lay there in a dead straight line with his left hand touching the cross. And they went and found him, and his wife, she started grieving and shouting. And they picked him up and they took him to the graveyard. Because the only bit of land you're ever going to need in this life is about 6 foot long, about 3 foot wide, and about 4 foot deep. And that's the land that he got. And they had to take what was left after everybody else in the village. But that day, he got the land that he deserved.
What a great story.
Whoa.
That was fantastic.
Right? Yeah, it's a Cossack story, and I'm old enough to be able to say these things because people don't actually believe me, but the people I'm looking at will believe me. A Cossack told me that one night in a pub.
So, okay, Mike, you know, some of you know Australian stories. Keith does, definitely.
Yeah, I know a couple. Yeah,
The 5 pound poms, or anyway, the settlers. What actually happened in Australia? They would come to Australia and they would say, "Here is some land. As much wood as you can cut in a certain amount of time, that will be your land." And hence there was a lot of deforestation, although they didn't have like the big machinery or anything. But that's how you got land as a settler in Australia, was by how much, as a farmer, how much wood, how much forest you could chop down. Just imagine that. I mean, it was hard yakka, as we say in Australia. As I said, they didn't have machinery and stuff. But to this day, you know, you can see where in beautiful, beautiful bushland, there's suddenly this lot that is totally deforested.
Oh, I can believe that. Yeah. There was an Australian that came, Francis Firebrand, his name was, and he came and he did when I was running Fate Machine, he came over and he did a couple of seasons with us, and he told us the story about how everybody got a different skin color. He said it was from his tribe story. And I tell that from time to time. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. It really is about the colours of people's skins and everything else. Sometime when we're sat together, I'd love to hear your version of it, because it's a few years since I've got it. It's probably changed in my mind, but still. Right, no, Machine, sorry, mate.
No problem.
Yeah, so go on, Avita, what you can say?
Whoa.
Yeah. Go on, Machine.
Whoa.
Right, well, sometimes you hear of families where the parents have got older, the children are too busy to go and see them, you know, modern life and all that. But maybe it's not quite such as modern as we think. Because this story that I'm going to tell you is about a merchant and his wife. Now, the part of England I live in, certainly in the very early times that Mike was talking about, 500, 600, 700, this part of the country was very rich because it's very near to the Low Countries, to Holland and what is now Belgium. and it was a lot of the trade came through. In fact, there is a town called King's Lynn, and it used to, the saying was that at one time there was more gold in Lynn than there was in London, because the merchants were so rich. So they did very well. And this merchant and his wife, they had a good life. They traded across to the Low Countries. They made much money. They had 3 beautiful sons. They lavished attention on them. They had them educated with the best monks and scribes that would teach them education. Their father taught them how to be merchants. He gave them money to set each one of them when they came of age in their own trading. And they built their own houses. They found a wife. They settled down. And life was fine for everybody. But of course, there came a time, as there does for all of us, when the merchant ailed and he died. And the mother became a widow. And all of the 3 boys said, "Mother, don't worry, we'll look after you. You never want for anything. We will make sure you can spend time with each of our families, and we'll share the responsibility of making sure that you're always looked after." And she thought this was wonderful. And after the funeral of her husband, she went to stay with her eldest son. And when she turned up at his fine house, there was his wife in her finest clothes, and the children all waiting to see their grandmother. The servants lined up to either bow or curtsy, depending whether they were men or women. And she was welcomed in and she was treated well. And it felt like no time at all before the 6 months was up and it was time to go to the second son. Well, the second son, he treated her well again. Beautiful. Everybody out saying, "Welcome, welcome, come to our home. You know, servants, look after my mother. She's an honoured guest." And that went well. And so she went to the youngest son and the same thing happened, and it was lovely. And of course, 18 months had passed. So she went back to the eldest son. Well, this time the wife was really busy, so she couldn't be there. And of course, some of the servants were there, but others, they had jobs to do. So they weren't there to bow and curtsy. And they said, "Oh, mother, do come in, do come in. You know where your room is. I'm sorry, I've got a lot of work on. I'll come down and see you later." And she went to speak to her grandchildren, who, like grandchildren when they get older, were a bit busy and they sort of like their nana, but you know, after a while, it's like, "Yeah, well, thank you, nana, but we've got to go and do something." So it wasn't quite as nice. And then 6 months after that, she went to the second son. And a very similar thing happened. And at the third, and by the time she was going round for the third time, there were no servants to greet her at the door. The children were busy doing something. The husband, her son, had left a note. "See my mother in. She knows where everything is. You know, we're terribly busy. My wife and I, we haven't had a holiday for ages. We'll be back sometime." And the same thing with the middle son, and the same with the youngest son. And she was reliant on them because in her husband's will, the boys had all had equal shares in everything. So all she had was the ability to live with each of them. And that's why her husband had left the money, on the understanding that she would be looked after. And it wasn't that they didn't look after her, but she didn't exactly feel like she was the most wanted guest in the place. But she wasn't a passive woman and she wasn't a stupid woman. She'd always helped her husband in the business. She had a sharp mind and they had good friends. And so she went to see the Bishop of Norwich, which is the main city of the county of Norfolk. And he treated her to a very nice meal, asked after her, and it wasn't long before she told the whole story. And he stroked his chin and he was thinking and he said, "Well, I could come and talk to your boys, but you know, if they felt the church was getting involved and telling them off, that could backfire on you, and I wouldn't want to do that. I know, I've got an idea. Do you remember when your husband and you went to a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, you brought back a gift for Norwich Cathedral?" She said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, what if I loan you that gift? In fact, I give it back to you with my blessing. But what you want to do is this." And he'd come up with a plan. And so the next morning, she'd gone back to the eldest son's house. And he said, "Oh, did you have a good time with the bishop?" She said, "Yes, my son, it was wonderful. And do you know what? He gave me back this chest that your father and I donated to the church. And contains the most valuable thing your father and I ever gave to anyone. And I talked it through with the bishop, and we decided it should be left to my child and his family that treat me the best. But it's not to be opened until after I die. And sure enough, there was a big lock on it. And they had the huge chest brought in and sat in the main hallway where everybody could see it. And every time everyone went past the chest, there it was with its massive bands of iron, its huge lock, its marvellous carving in the wood. And the son was thinking, that's some chest. Whatever's in there must be worth a fortune. So he made it his business to make sure that Mama was looked after. The children were instructed not to be so rude to their grandmother. They must share with her. They must listen to her stories. They must tell her what they've been doing. And the wife started sitting with her mother-in-law in the afternoons and chatting and sewing together. And the meals they made were beautiful. And the son at the end of the 6 months said, Mother, you don't have to leave. Why don't you just stay with us? It's so much easier. No, my son. You know what your father wanted? He wanted you all to share in my care. And so they ordered the great cart to come. 4 great hulking men struggled with this heavy chest and put it on the cart. And the eldest son wistfully watched it going down his drive to his brother's house. And the brother was told the same story, just how precious the contents of this was. And it would go to the son, who showed the most love and tender care of his mother by the suggestion of the bishop. So again, she was treated royally. They lavished attention on her. They gave her gifts. They took her out. They treated her. Every day was like a holiday. So at the end of 6 months, it had flown by, and the son was saying, no, please stay, Mother, stay. We so love your company. It's only for your company that we're saying this, because you're so wonderful. He said, no, I must go. So again, this thing was lumped onto the cart. And so the circuit went round, and each time she continued the circuit, she was given all the love and attention she could wish for. But each of the sons and each of the families, they would kind of try and lift it or push it. And in their imaginations, whatever was in it got bigger and shinier and better. But time comes to all of us. And there was the time when the merchant's wife fell ill. And it so happened she was at the middle son's house when it happened. It could have been any of them. And as she lay in bed, and they made sure she was looked after, and her son said, Mother, how will we know? You know, have you written a will or anything? Just asking. She said, my son, when I die, the bishop has got the key. You send for the bishop with the key. Inside the chest is my last wishes for the treasure that I am bestowing upon that one of you who looked after me best. And so within a day or two, she'd faded away and life left her. And the son could hardly contain his excitement. After all, Mother had died in his house. And he sent for the bishop and reluctantly his 2 brothers and their families. And they all stood around his great hall. And the bishop came in with a big key for the big lock. And he said, well, my boys, your mother has left written instructions. I wish you all to turn your back. I will get them out and I will read them to you. So they all turned their back. They heard the great lifting of the lid. They heard as the bishop got the piece of paper out, they heard the cum as the lid went down. And he unrolled the piece of paper and it said, my dear sons, each of you has shown me care and love and understanding equal to that of your 2 brothers. And therefore, I instruct that the precious contents of this chest be left to all of you. You will have to find suitable somewhere to put it, unless you wish to give it back to the church. But the bishop will now show you what it is I've left you. And the bishop, with a flurry and maybe a little smile on his face, said, here, is the contents of your mother's gift to you all. It is the most precious, holy thing that you could possibly get. And he opened it up and he said, sand from Jerusalem.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, that lovely machine. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. Right. There's lovely. Now I'm going to see if I can do this because I want to show you something. So I'm going to go to share. And that. Can you all see that?
Yes. Is oh yes.
Yes. That is the hybrid day that we're running from the fire station in Much Wenlock in conjunction with the World Storytelling Cafe that Despina Ariou runs from. She's the Greek lady that comes from Syros. It's the third time she's been to Much Wenlock. So it starts at 10 o'clock and it finishes about 2:30, and that's what's happening. So we've got storytelling and education, interview with a festival artist, slot reserved for Shane, Bajia and Wellbeing. That's Lucy Woods doing that for us. I'm not quite sure where she's going to be geographically because last I heard she was in Canada. Okay. We'll have a chat with the mayor, who's very kindly come to talk to us about the World Storytelling Cafe. John Rowe is giving us the names of the tellers to take part at some point. Interview with a festival artist at the fire station. Jewish Voices. Now, the anti-war pro-peace stories this year are coming from inside Israel. So they're coming from tellers who are inside Israel. Not last year we had people that weren't inside the Middle East, but this time they're coming from the Middle East. And then we're having a live connection for what's happening in Wenlock, which is to do with the big sing that we have at the end of the festival.
I think I must have missed the date.
It's the 10th, 11th, 12th of October. It starts a week, it finishes, it will be finished, like I said, in a week's time. So it starts next Friday evening.
Okay.
So, and you'll be surprised, Rasheen, how small it is. It's not as big as Fate, but we're getting there now, and we've sold some tickets and everything else. So we're probably going to have a couple of, 100 people knocking around the place altogether. That's what we're talking about. So it's not a massive festival, but we did get some backing from the English Arts Council. The Arts Council of England, we call it ACE. Okay, so I have to say that because they've given us some money, and so I'm happily spending it at the moment. Yeah.
I'm all for giving money.
Yeah.
What day is the actual links to the fire station? Is that all on
10 o'clock Sunday morning.
Oh, that's Sunday, right?
Yeah, Sunday morning. Yeah, right. So
Wait, 10 o'clock UK time?
UK time. Everything's in UK time. Yeah.
5 o'clock.
Everything's in UK. The whole world is in UK time. Okay, don't worry about it.
Oh, Bubba's free.
I will endeavor to tune in. That's 5 a.m. for me.
Well, it goes on for 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, you know, we'd love to see you there, Baba. We really would. But don't sort of break your neck to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you could come in a bit later on in the day. I do realise that other people aren't in sync with us. You know, it is. The world is split into three, Avita. What was ours, what is ours, and what should have been ours, right? So.
We're going to talk about that.
Can you send a link to WhatsApp or something? Because I can't see anything that you put up.
Right.
Even if I move, because I'm only on my phone, my tablet won't do the Zoom anymore. It's too old.
Oh, is it?
But anyway.
Can you see that, though?
No, I can only see
she's
you.
saying she's on her phone, Mike.
Right.
She's on her phone.
Okay. Now, Peter, if you drop me an email to make sure, I've probably got your email somewhere, but make sure I will make sure the program gets to you. Yeah. Okay. I will.
And Mike,
yeah,
just to be on the safe side, email me as well.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely, I will do that. Okay. And I would love to see you both. And I know the Zoom and the hybrid festivals aren't as good as people making face-to-face, but at least we're linking up with people from Canada and South Africa and all the other bits and pieces. So we're doing our best in the times that we live in the 21st century, in the times that we're having to live in. Getting people talking to each other is a good start, if nothing else. Okay.
Yes.
So Baba, we come to you.
Okay. I'm glad that we have been sharing stories, and I don't like to call them factoids, but insight to culture. And I'm going to do a story that relates to my culture as being an African in America and being an African American. And we live in very trying times. We all know this. And my city is currently under occupation. A little bit different, but it is under occupation. And I want to share this story because it is it has a deep connection to me. And I've told the story before, but it was a long time ago. So this is a story that we used to say was from the antebellum South. And that's the South before the Civil War. And this story, well, if I tell you what the story is about, there's no need to tell the story. So let me tell the story. And I might slide in and out of dialect. But this here story is about two slaves a long time ago. Long before anyone in this here room, this here Zoomy thingy, was born, is when this story took place. Now, there were several things that slaves were not supposed to do, and 3 of them was not work. But there was these 2 slaves. Now, I want y'all to be listening here. There was these 2 slaves who decided they're going to take themselves a break under a great big tree. Now, see, that would have me nervous right there. 2 slaves under a tree, but that's another story. Well, sir, as the 2 slaves were there taking a break they wasn't supposed to take, one slave, he turned to the other and he said, "You know what I did this morning?" "Now, what you do?" "I cuss out the master." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did. Master ticked me off." That's not the word he used. "The master ticked me off, and I cussed him up one side the fence and down the other." "And he didn't say nothing?" "Not a mumbling word." "He didn't do nothing?" "I'm here to tell you. I cuss him out, and I's here." "Well, then the next time the master ticks me off, I'm going to cuss him out too." So about a week went by, or it could have been 7 days. And when the 2 slaves met again, one was limping. He was limping like he could barely walk. And the other slave said to him, "What's wrong with you?" I thought you told me you cuss out the master." "I did." "I thought you told me he ain't do nothing." "He didn't." "I thought you told me he ain't say nothing." "Not a mumbling word. I cussed him upside one side of the fence and down the other." "Well, the master made me angry the other day and I cussed him out, and that man tried to beat me till I was dead." "You didn't cuss him out to his face, did you?" Well, yeah, didn't you?" No. Master made me angry, and I walked down to the South 40 where the great big fence is, with the great big, and I went cussing him upside one side of the fence, and I was still cussing when I came down the other side of the fence. "You cussed the master out to his face? Boy, you sure is one dumb slave." Well, slave said, "Well, he had nothing to say for the rest of the day." So when they met again, the slave was walking better. In fact, he had a little extra pep in his step. And the other slave said, "You seem awful happy. What's up with you?" He said, "Yeah, I'm feeling real good." He said, "Why are you feeling good?" "Well, a few moments ago, I looked up Missy's dress." Now, Missy would be the wife of the plantation owner. And the other slave said, "Man, hey, don't play that. Don't. Shh. You're going to get us hung. And we're already under the big tree. Shh. I ain't got nothing to shush about. I looked up Missy's dress so long, I got a crack in my neck." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. I'm telling you. I just hiked that dress up and I looked so long I got a crick in my neck. Well, what did she say? Not a mumbling word. Well, what she do? She ain't do nothing. I told you. I hiked that dress up and I looked so long I got a crick in my neck. And she ain't say nothing. You not listening. She ain't say a mumbling word. Huh. Well, you know what? Next time I get a hankering, I'm going to look up Missy's dress too. Well, about 2 weeks passed. Nah, that's not right. It was 14 days. And when the two slaves met again, one could barely walk. He was more, the only thing that kept him upright was he had 2 sticks he was using as walking sticks because he could barely move. And they met under that tree. You know, I would have stopped meeting under that tree, but that's another story. They met under that tree and the slave said, man, you look like you died and came back again. What happened to you? I thought you told me you looked up Mrs. Dress. I did. I thought you told me she ain't do nothing. Nah, she didn't. I looked so long I got a crick in my neck. I thought you told me she ain't say nothing. Not a mumbling word. Well, the other day I was passing by the big house. Missy was sitting on the porch drinking one of them mint juleps. And I remember what you said. So I walked up on the porch. I hiked her dress up and I took me a good long look. Well, it would have been, except for she started screaming. And when she started screaming, the master came out and he saw what I was doing. And that man, he tried to kill me till I was dead and bring me back and tried to kill me again. You didn't look up her dress while she had it on, did you? Well, yeah, didn't you? No. See, it was laundry day, and that dress was hanging out on the clothesline, and I just walked over and I hiked that dress, and I looked so long I got a crick in my neck. You looked up Missy's dress while she had it on, and you call me stupid? You sure is one dumb slave. Now, as with most of my stories, there's a lesson to it. Lesson 1. Don't believe everything you hear. Like we're going through here in the United States, but that's another story. Lesson 2. Before you decide you're going to prank someone, trick someone, play a joke on someone, remember this. What goes around
comes around.
Comes around. Asante. You figured it out early.
Well, there's more than one version of more than one story sometimes. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I was watching Evita's face and she was going, oh, and she was figuring out. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like that, I like that story. So it is one of the first stories I ever told. It was probably one of the first 10 stories I ever told. In my youngin' days when my beard was black and I had hair under my kuthi, but that's one of my favorite stories. Last thing, people often ask me, what is my favorite story? And I finally had to tell them this. My favorite story is the story I'm telling at the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's a sculpture in ice. Yeah. So one of my favorites, so you've heard of a fellow called Robin Hood, haven't you, Baba and Evita?
Yes, I have.
William Tell probably did the same. You know why he was so famous for his archery? Because he used to pick up his bow and he used to pick up his arrow and he used to shoot it at the side of a barn. Then he'd walk along with a pot of paint and he'd paint the target around it.
That'll work. I gotta remember that. That'll work.
Right. Yeah, that's what they used to tell about old Robin. He was the best archer in the whole of England.
Yes.
Particularly after, and he was one of the best painters as well. Okay.
When I was a very small person and William Tell used to be on the television and they played the William Tell overture, in the playground we used to sing a song about William Tell.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Come away with William Tell, stick a pin up his bum and run like hell.
Oh,
Oh,
ouch.
yeah, yeah. And the
Wait,
other
you
thing
were allowed to say hell as a child?
Pardon?
yeah.
You were allowed to say hell as a child?
Only in the playground when no one was listening, Bubba. See,
Ah, okay.
we'd have been in trouble if anyone had heard. We waited till we were the other side of the playground.
When
Yeah.
I was growing up, you couldn't even say darn.
No.
If you
No,
said
I
darn in the presence of an adult, you were in trouble.
Yeah.
And we used to have, the kids in my neighborhood used to call people ma hunchies. And ma hunchies, because they were doing a kid-friendly version of a very bad word, which was mother, fill in the blank. But you
Yeah.
couldn't say that. So it was mother hunchy. I guess the hunchy was supposed to be dialect for humping. But yeah, they would find the kids in my neighborhood found creative ways of getting around the custom. But we couldn't even say darn. If I said darn, I better have some socks in my hands.
So the famous story about Robin Hood was when he was lying in his deathbed and his cousin, the Abbotess of Newark, was poisoning him and pretending to give him medicine at the same time. He turned round to Little John and his men who came to see him, and he said, "Give me my bow and give me my arrow, and I will shoot it. And where the arrow lands, that's where you have to bury me, on the edge of Sherwood Forest." So they went and got his bow and they went and got his arrow and they gave it to him. And he shot the last arrow that he ever shot, which is why they never found his grave, because they buried him behind the wardrobe.
Go to your room. Whoa.
Okay, so you go to the monastery in Newark, and you don't want to look at the edge of the forest. Start taking the walls away, and that's where you'll find him. You'll have to tell Alice Roberts, Rasheen. Okay.
Okay, Mike, I never want to hear you comment about my bad jokes again.
They're some of my good ones. What are you talking about?
Hey, yeah, but sometimes the best ones are the bad ones.
Yeah.
You know.
Right, so I'm going to call it now. We've been going an hour and 10 minutes. We've had I'll be here in a fortnight's time. For those of you that aren't at the festival, please come to the hybrid one. And I'm going to finish with this, Rasheen. When you go and tell Wallace, I'm going to walk into the George and Dragon pub, and I'm going to buy 2 pints of beer at the same time. One for him and one for me. As he's not there, I'll have to drink his, so I'm going to have to owe him one next time I see him. Okay?
That's really good of you, Mike. He'll feel comforted by that.
Absolutely. So you tell him next time we meet, it's mine's the first pint. Okay?
Right. I'll certainly tell him that when he wakes up. Thank you.
If I have a pint of Guinness, will that be okay?
You can have a pint of anything you like.
So real quick before you hang up, because we're talking about all this drinking. Like I said, when I was in my early 20s, very early, I went to a very posh pub. We don't call them pubs in here, and I had me a pint of Guinness. Well, Guinness, people didn't associate with Guinness, so I'm in this tavern, and I'm the only black person there, and I ordered the Guinness, and there were 2 older white guys not far from me, and they were watching me, and I hadn't touched the Guinness, and they came over and started talking to me, and I still hadn't touched the Guinness, and they said, "You haven't touched your Guinness." I said, "No, it's not room temperature," and you know, Guinness is best when drank at room temperature. And they looked at each other like, "How does he know?" You know, well, I'd had Guinness before, and they were so taken by a black guy drinking Guinness at room temperature, they paid for my lunch and the Guinness.
Good result.
Well, that's fair enough. That's a proper Irish story, that is. That's the sort of thing that happens in Ireland. When you go over to Ireland, that's exactly the sort of thing that happens all the time over there. It really is. So those 2 guys were Irish. They just happened to be sat in America, but they were Irish. That's the sort of thing that happens.
That's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
But it was a nice lunch. I stayed a little bit too long. I had to stop drinking because I had to go back to work. They gave me an extra long lunch for something I had. And but
so years ago I had business interests over in the north of Ireland, in the southern part of the north of Ireland, and I was coming back into Dublin to get over to Shropshire, and I stopped at this pub. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, And I walked in on a Friday afternoon and said, I'll have a pint of Guinness, please. And he said, we're not open to 5 o'clock. Well, the lights were on, the fire was on, he was behind the bar. And I just turned around and went, you're not open. He said, no, we don't open till 5 o'clock. I said, well, if it's all right with you, then I've had a long day. I'll sit by the fire and I'll wait till 5 o'clock and then I'll have a Guinness. And he said these words, Baba. He said, well, if you're waiting, you can have a pint of Guinness while you're waiting.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I got
so I had
that.
A pint of
Yeah.
Guinness I had a pint of Guinness while I was waiting. And when it came to 5 o'clock, I went to the bar and he said, I'll have another one, please. And he went, now you owe me for 2. And I said, fine, the money wasn't a problem. So I paid him for 2. And I sat down there because before the pubs are open in Ireland, you can have a pint of Guinness while you're waiting for the pub to open.
I like that. I like
just
that.
their rules. You just play by their rules. It's Ireland. You just play
Yeah.
by their rules. They have different rules. That's all. Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, I want to thank Rosin, pronounce your name correctly for me.
Sheen.
Say
Rashid.
again?
Rose
Roisin.
Sheen.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure, and I was looking at it and said Rosin. Roisin. I want to thank
Rashid was in
Roisin.
Marrakesh. Rashid was
alright.
in Marrakesh. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was the
okay.
one. She was the one with a bottle of whiskey every night. She drank a bottle.
Actually,
That sounds like,
Cuban rum.
oh, see, if it was rum, yes, rum. I'm a rum guy.
Right.
Yeah.
I drink
Right.
a rum
If you
that's so
think Rona
smooth
can-
it sings.
Yeah, if you
So
think
thank
Rona
you,
can drink a
Rashid.
lot,
Thank
you
you,
want to
Keith.
start
Thank you,
drinking
Anita.
with her.
Say again?
If you think Rona Barber can drink a bit, you want to start with drinking with her, mate. Oh, she's the only person I know who has whiskey for breakfast every morning.
I know, but see, Mike's a storyteller, so we know better.
Absolutely.
You know,
I'd like to thank everyone
No,
too
I
for the
couldn't have
stories
whiskey.
because it's my.
Can I just tell
Thank you,
something?
Kay.
We're just joshing about it. We go, Beach, I've sent you a message on WhatsApp. Would you send me your
I
email?
saw, yeah.
I put my
Can I just share
email.
one thing with you?
Go on.
2 years ago, I was over. We spent quite a bit of the winter in Spain because we don't like the cold wet English. And my sister said, if you're in Spain, can you look for some lavender honey because I love it and I just can't find it in England. And I looked everywhere. I went to all the major cities. I went to all the major shops. No lavender honey. But we went to a town called Guadix, and that is famous because it's got cave houses and people live in these cave houses. And the government has actually built a sort of bathroom and a kitchen on the front because then if they supply them with water and power, they can charge them rents. When they just lived in a cave, it was free. And when I went to these cave houses, one of the men there kept bees and I got a jar of lavender honey. So when I came home and gave it to my sister, she said, where did you find it? I said, look, I know I'm a storyteller. You're never going to believe this, but I searched all of Spain until I found an old man living in a cave. Yeah, it sounds like the sort of stuff we would make up, but it was true. I actually found this honey. I bought it off an old man who lived in a cave. So there we go.
Roisin, that
I
only
believe
goes to prove that sometimes it bees that way.
Oh.
Right. Thank you very much. Until you told me off for telling jokes. Rasheen, I'm going to go and buy 2 pints in the George. Tell Wallace I'm thinking of him. Okay.
Tell him.
Bye-bye, folks. Thanks for
Bye,
being here.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Lovely evening.
Live long
Bye-bye.
and prosper. All right. Thanks, Wally, for flying the magic carpet. See out.